Our second lesson is from the Gospel of John, the 6th chapter, the beginning of the story of the feeding of the 5,000 according to John. Listen now to God's word. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. This is the word of the Lord. This past week, we have all been gripped by the all too vivid images of the flood-damaged New Jersey and New York. Images that show the vast devastation from Hurricane Sandy. We've heard stories of heroism and stories of tragedy. We've seen the flooded homes, the debris-scattered streets, the wrecked cars, the dark, frightening hallways of public housing, the lines of people waiting for food and for gas. And we've grieved with the families over the loss of life. When and where will there be enough gasoline, food, blankets, medicines, electricity, and shelter for these people whose lives have been totally upended? Cold, darkness, and hunger are real. Once Jesus had an experience with hungry people. He was in the wilderness and a large crowd had followed him. They'd followed him all the way around by land on the Sea of Galilee to the far shore. The crowd followed him because they were eager to hear his teaching, to receive his healing. And the day wore on. Perhaps they had gone far greater distance than they had anticipated or imagined. They had little with them. They were stranded in the wilderness without food. There was nothing to eat. According to John, Jesus asked Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" The other Gospels tell us that the disciples urged Jesus, "Well, just send them home. Let them take care of themselves. What are they to us?" It would take a half year's wages, one said, to feed so many hungry people. But John tells us that Jesus knew what he had in mind to do. There was a boy there. In that vast crowd, a boy who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. John doesn't tell us how he was noticed or how he came to the front. I imagine he was old enough to go follow Jesus on his own, but not old enough to be called a man. I can see his mother preparing his provisions that day, the 5 small loaves and the 2 dried fish, and wrapping them in a cloth and perhaps tucking them inside of his robe or in his bag. He was eager to hear Jesus, so eager that he continued to follow him no matter how far he went from home. And he had enough food to sustain him for the day, but not enough to make a difference if he shared it with others. As the day wore on, he would have been hungry just like everyone else. And how was he going to pull the food out of his pouch and see everyone else hungry around him? What was he going to do? Somehow his little store of food drew the attention of the disciples, and somehow this boy, not yet a man, was willing to give up, to sacrifice the little bit he had to Jesus for the sake of others. I doubt if he had any idea of what Jesus was going to do with this little bit of food, this small offering. How would he make it into a feast for a large crowd? But as John drops a hint, it was near the feast of Passover, another time in which God provided for the people. With this sacrificial gift, Jesus fed the vast multitude. And they gathered up what was left over, and it was enough to fill 12 baskets. That is to say, it was enough for the whole 12 tribes of Israel, the whole people of God. The abundance of God's grace there for everyone, because a little boy was willing to sacrifice. Several weeks ago, I was at a gathering of some clergy at a conference in Columbus, Ohio. As a part of our experience, our group visited the exhibit at Ohio State of the work of the American photographer Annie Leibovitz. If you know her work, she has an incredible gift for capturing in her photographic images the inner life, the spirit, the character of her subjects. And after walking through the gallery and looking at all of her famous subjects, from presidents and artists and writers and musicians, I came to a photograph of an elderly woman with gray hair, deep eyes, generous smile. And in her arm, she had tucked, this arm that was stout and veined, her Bible. I thought, who is this among all these famous people? And then I read the name, Osceola McCarty. I searched my mind for some memory of her, and then it came to me. Osceola McCarty, oh yes, the woman who gave the University of Southern Mississippi her life savings. $150,000 that she had earned as a housekeeper and as a woman who did laundry. You see, Osceola McCarty quit school in the 6th grade because she had to care for her grandmother. And then she had to join her mother in taking in laundry, $1 or $2 a bundle. And then after the Second World War, she would get $10. But she was never able to go back to school. She never married. She lived simply. She put her hard-earned money in the bank. She never owned a car. She would walk to the grocery store, pushing her grocery cart more than a mile, and then home again. She said, I can't do everything, but I can do something to help somebody. And what I can do, I will do. I wish I could do more. When she was over 90, the friends he had who worked at the bank helped her realize just how much money she had and helped her determine what she wanted to do with her money. And so she decided to give some to her church and some to some distant cousins, but she decided to give the majority of it to the University of Southern Mississippi, a campus 3 miles away from where she lived, a campus she had never even visited, because she wanted to give somebody the opportunity that she never had to go to college and to get an education. The secretary to the president of the university said this about Osceola: people treated her like a monument, but she was really a movement, and it will keep moving. And those words were true. Inspired by her gift, other people began to give to this same scholarship money, and it was magnified many times over. And it was her gift that also helped inspire Ted Turner to give away his $1 billion. And so I looked at her photograph there in the gallery, among all those famous people, an almost unknown woman, and I thought, so this is what the face of sacrifice looks like. On Friday evening this week, Dr. Lewis Weeks, the former president of Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia, talked about the past, the present, the future of the Reformed Church and the Presbyterian Church. He talked about the disproportionate influence that Presbyterians have had on our nation throughout the centuries, on our national political life in education, medicine, law, business, and other professions. These men and women of faith have made a difference, he said, because they sacrificed time and money to establish colleges and universities and churches and homes for children and hospitals and work together to support our common life as a people. They gave their time, their money, they gave themselves. For we know that sacrifice is not just about giving our resources. Sacrifice is about giving the most precious gift of all, the gift of self. Or is this not what God teaches us in the gift of Jesus? We heard the beautiful words from the book of Ruth. It was during a time of famine that Naomi and her husband Elimelech leave Judah with their 2 sons because there's a famine in the land of Judah. They go to Moab, an enemy country, to try to eke out a living for themselves. And while they're there, their 2 boys, in a sense, assimilate into the culture and marry Moabite women. The sons die, the father dies, and Ruth and Orpah and Naomi are left. Ruth hears that God has visited the land of Judah and there is food again, and so she determines to go home to try to scratch out a life among her own people and her own family. And she tells her daughter-in-laws to stay in Moab where they might have a chance to have another family. She has nothing left to give them. Orpah returns home, but Ruth clings to her and says those unforgettable words, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Yes, we hear those words most often at weddings, and that's a good thing. For marriage will never survive without a community of commitment, 2 people committed to sacrifice for each other. A healthy marriage depends upon compromise and negotiation and communication. And if we always insist on having our way, if we never give anything up in a relationship, that relationship becomes out of balance, unhealthy, lacking mutuality. When couples make decisions about accepting job opportunities or moving to another city or raising children or managing household responsibilities, there will always be compromises in which each party gives up something for the other in order to gain something greater together. Yes, it's good to hear those words at weddings, but it's even better to hear them in the ordinary give and take of life. And if we think about our lives as we are doing this fall as spiritual journeys, we come to understand that sacrifice is a part of what makes our own lives rich and full. There's a kind of paradox at work that only those who know the joy of sacrificial giving understand. And it's simply this: that the more we give away, the more we give ourselves to others, the more we gain. Ruth gave up her familiar friends, her family, her country, and went with her mother-in-law to a land that was unknown to her, a land with a different language and customs and even a different God. She put her life on the line on that road to Judah, to an uncertain future. And God honored Ruth's sacrifice, Ruth's commitment to Naomi. For you know the story. They go to the town of Bethlehem, and it is there that Ruth marries Boaz, and Ruth and Boaz are the parents of Obed, and Obed is the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David, and King David, the ancestor of Jesus. What amazing things God does when people of faith sacrifice. The sacrifices God calls us to make are not just about high drama and extraordinary moments. Oh no. The most important sacrifices in our lives happen in the hundreds of small decisions we make each day about our family, our friends, our work, our calling, our faith, our church. These small acts make a life, and they determine what kind of people we will be. For every day there are people who sacrifice their time to pay attention to someone who is troubled, who listen to a child read, or send a note to a soldier serving far away. And all around us this week, we see examples of people who are literally putting their lives on the line, risking their lives to help clean up debris in the streets, restore electricity after the storm, rebuild flooded homes. All across our nation, people are sacrificing time and spirit and resources to bring relief to those who suffer. And we in our church will join with them in giving them our best. On this All Saints Sunday celebration, we think about the saints who've gone before us, and I'm not so much talking about the saints in the stained glass windows as I'm talking about the saints that we hold in our hearts. Today we remember in prayer those who've entered the church triumphant this past week, and I suspect that of all the things we remember most about them, what we remember is how they sacrificed. How they sacrificed themselves for others. For there is no more sacred path in life than the path of giving our time, our resources, and even ourselves for others. Some time ago, I visited in the healthcare center of a large retirement community here in Indianapolis. I went to see a man in our church who had had a stroke. He was there lying in the bed, and seated beside him in a chair was his wife of more than 50 years. She was holding his hand. At the foot of the bed was a neatly folded newspaper. I knew that she'd already read the news to him because that was their daily ritual. The windowsill, there were photographs of their grandchildren, their most prized possessions. The table next to the bed, the dinner tray was there. It had recently arrived, and soon she would be helping him with his dinner. Theirs was a relationship that didn't need a lot of words, which was a good thing because he was having great difficulty speaking. He was sick and she was healthy. And I thought about all the places she could go and all the things she could be doing. And I thought, there is no place she would rather be than right there beside that bed, holding that hand. I thought to myself, this is the most beautiful picture of love that I have ever seen. Amen.